So I've been pretty bored recently, and that's led to me looking into the massive itch.io bundle I purchased a few months ago. A lot of the games are very small projects, but they're worth looking into, so in this video I'm going to give my thoughts on several. Unicycles, lamps, blunt head trauma. Welcome to Unfair Jousting Fair. Here's the setup. It's a jousting fair and no one had the budget to rent horses. Let's get the biggest thing out of the way. Riding a unicycle is hard, and I congratulate the game for recreating it in a way that's both amusing, frustrating, and I assume an accurate portrayal of how difficult it is to ride a unicycle. It's a little like QWOP in that regard, but slightly easier than that would imply. You only have two buttons to move, which both shift your character's balance and allow them to pedal by tapping them repeatedly. I'm bad at the game, and thus not the best judge of controls, but I can say that failure actually does feel like my fault and not the game screwing me over. There are some times when I just start to pedal backwards though, and I'm not sure why. That's pretty irritating. Unlike QWOP though, you have a long blunt object to bonk people on the head with. This is where the unfair part of the game's title comes in, because the object you're using can be anything from a baton with tassels to a giant f**k-off street sign. This will absolutely lead to unfair matches, but having a rolling pin against a lamp feels like less of a death sentence when the controls are just as much as likely to kill you as your opponent. There are three modes, which I've called Fair, Noun, Street Fight, and Fair, Adjective. Fair, Noun, is the basic first to three wins mode. The map can change slightly with different things on the ground, and every round you get new weapons. It's perfectly fine. Street Fight is my favorite of the three, with only one round and a health bar for each character. If you're like me and sometimes forget you're tilting your character face first into the dirt, this is really useful since control mistakes are more forgiving. It also allows me to repeatedly bonk people on the head with a hammer, which is fun. However, since there's only one round, your weapons don't reset, which can make a broken matchup feel like a prolonged inevitability. There's still the chance to win based on pure skill, but when you have a rolling pin and the enemy has an ore, things don't feel very fair. And on the subject of fair, Adjective, is the final mode. Both players have the same weapon, same helmet, and a more detailed scoring system than bonk to win. This is the mode with the least variety, but it has an even playing field. I also have to give points for the aesthetic, which includes a calm piano rendition of the game's theme and juxtaposes the gameplay very well. Oh, and there's also local co-op. Flash might be dead, but there's still this. The Tetris theme is covered by someone playing a kazoo, and there's absolutely no way to mute it or turn the volume down. This game has a boss fight where you fight a Nazi mad scientist with a skeleton army by firing 600 bombs into his torso. So yeah, this game is pretty good. This is a first-person shooter dungeon crawler roguelike, where each room is its own little arena. These levels are procedurally generated and are bound to feel a little samey over time, but the combat more than makes up for it. Combat is fast, fun, and intense. There have been several times where I actually started leaning to the side in real life to evade projectiles coming at me in the game. This is accompanied by a series of perks. Unlike the previous roguelike I reviewed, Nuclear Throne, perks aren't tied to leveling because there is no leveling. Instead, you get one perk for every boss you kill. And there's two bosses per floor, one you need to kill to progress, and one that's optional. And you can just outright find or buy perks. If you're smart or lucky, you can have 4 to 6 perks just a couple of floors in. Some of these perks are uninteresting, some of them are really good, and some of them will actively harm you. A lot of them though can be a massive help, and used in tandem with other perks and abilities can become stupidly overpowered. I tend to play the character with a grenade launcher. I can get several perks to make my grenades do more damage, poison enemies, split into more bombs, and summon chainsaw blades from the pits of hell. And good thing too, as later floors are absolutely flooded with enemies and traps. Breaking the meta is a core aspect of the game, and it's one of the strongest elements, as it's a very amusing power fantasy, but the rest of the game ramps the challenge up to ensure that it doesn't become boring. However, the perks are one of the only aspects that really stand out, as well as the bosses. The weapons have some standouts, like the cannon and the blowfish gun, but are mostly conventional and not all that satisfying. Enemies are mostly fine, fairly uneventful, and the Nazi soldiers are not only the worst from a morality standpoint, but a mechanical one as well. His gun isn't hit scan, but it might as well be. In contrast to the enemies, levels are mechanically decent but visually dull, and the music is forgettable. The interesting thing about paranautical activity is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Take any aspect on its own, and you'll find it good at best and lacking at worst, but when you put it all together, something really fun comes out. my friends. Ha! You thought! But no, seriously, barring the release of the Second Coming of Christ or the Seventh Coming of Satan, I plan on never reviewing Ubisoft games until they can get their shit together and stop assaulting their employees while the CEO buries his head so deep in the sand the excavators found an entire Prince of Persia remaster along with him. Shutter Stroll lies on the exact opposite of the spectrum to paranautical activity, and is literally about wandering around islands taking pictures. Talking about the controls of a game like this feels like criticizing a painting by talking about the museum's architecture, but I'm going to touch on it anyway because looking around feels a little wonky and the walking is kinda slow. God, I am such a piece of shit. The islands are all procedurally generated, which will lead to a couple issues with some islands like janky geometry, but for the most part things look pretty good. The colors are alien, but they're these really nice pastels, and the trees are visually striking. These are genuinely beautiful islands. Walking around these places, taking in the ambience, it's relaxing, and even if the museum itself has creaky floors and no AC, it's still a good place to see some appealing art. Yeah, I got nothing. You might be wondering what the through line is here, but there is none. I picked games that looked interesting to me or I had played before. Join me next time where I'll analyze every polygon on Ronald Reagan's face and light myself on fire. Dear my friends, Redux. I'm sorry I tricked you into thinking I was actually going to talk about Rainbow Six Siege. That was scummy of me. I'm not going to review it though. Go watch the Gmod Royale video or something.